The Buckeyes are back on the field talking Ohio State football with Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. We got Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone, and hopefully Steve Hellwagon somewhere out there on the roadways of the Buckeye State. Steve Hellwagon joining us from Bucknuts. This is Ohio State Buckeyes Live, our 41st edition, and again, Ohio State back on the practice field. Guys, how you doing today?
Doing great.
Pretty good.
Excellent. Kevin, let's start with you. You guys got to check out the Buckeyes, at least run around a little bit on the practice field. What's catching your eye at this point, and what storylines are you tracking?
Well, I think we're going to talk about some injury news here in a minute, so I'll lay out on that right now. When it comes to everything else that I saw, Justin Fields looked really good out there here in year number 2 with the Buckeyes, out there throwing the deep ball. I mean, granted, they were out there in shorts, and it was very, very early, but very impressed with what I saw there. Very impressed with the freshman receivers, G. Scott, Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mookie Cooper, all looking really good out there. One of the big things that I'm having to work on is all the new roster numbers. Everybody's wearing a new number, it feels like, right now. So I have no idea who anybody is at this point. So, I think by the time we get to the spring game, I may know where everybody is at this point. But, it was a spirited practice for practice number 1 and only being in shorts. But, obviously, some of the news that we learned coming out of it is going to put a little bit of a damper with Master Teague. But, plenty of positives that you can still look at in terms of what they've immediately accomplished.
Well, yeah, before we get to the Master Teague news, is there any word on who may receive the what I would guess would be the very much coveted number 0?
That's a good question. I'm wondering, we had somebody on our board suggest DeJuan Jones at 6'9" and 350 odd pounds, putting number 0 on him and see how that looks.
Not sure that number is exactly legal for a lineman, but who knows?
That's what I'm saying. Give him the ball.
Block O.
Yeah, exactly.
At Ohio State, it's block O. That's what the number 0 would represent at Ohio State. Block O.
Steve, drive safely. Just make sure you're driving safely here.
I'm not driving.
Oh, okay.
An emergency trip to go see a basketball game, so that's what we're doing.
All right, very good. We appreciate you stopping by and being here as always.
Yep, great to be here.
All right, we discussed it just a few weeks ago that the running back room wasn't maybe, at least on paper, up to the standards that it has been in recent years. And Master Teague was the number 1 guy, but certainly would have to fight to keep that job. Now he's really going to have to fight, but that fight's going to not continue until August. I will let anybody dive in who wants to outline what the injury status is and what we know at this point.
Well, what Ohio State has confirmed, they won't confirm anything about the injury other than to say that Master Teague is now unavailable for the rest of spring. I've been told, others have been told it was, there's some sort of Achilles injury there, not knowing the extent and full or any type of recovery, but we've seen players go down with Achilles the last two springs at Ohio State, and both players, linebackers, Tuff Borland and Justin Hilliard, made it back in time for the season. Being a running back and being a linebacker are a couple of different things. So Ohio State had 2 healthy running backs, 2 healthy scholarship running backs coming into spring. And Ryan Day even said on Monday, things are thin, but there wouldn't be a crisis unless they lost another guy. And now they have. And so now it's crisis mode. And what you'll see now is 5th-year senior Demario McCall probably go back over to running back. He was with the receivers. He's been moved between running back and receiver his entire time at Ohio State, so this is nothing new for him. And Day even said that Demario was going to play running back in the spring at some point. So, they're confident in his abilities. But, now you've got, once again, you're down to 2 healthy or 2 scholarship running backs, because Demario, who knows if he's been a guy that has not stayed healthy for his career. So we'll see. Steele Chambers now, the redshirt freshman, I believe he kept his red shirt, is a big kid, like 6'1", 6'2", 225, something like that. And now this is his show, at least for the spring, and it's his opportunity to put his foot out there and say, I want to be the starter at Ohio State, because it's, even though Master Teague rushed for 789 odd yards last year, Ryan Day never said that he is the starting running back. And so You get back to August and Marcus Crowley will be back, who is a guy who was promising and tore his ACL last October or November during the Maryland game. So he'll be good to go for camp in the fall. A lot of unknowns right now, and now you kind of hope for Ohio State's sake that Steel Chambers steps up and becomes this guy. But they throw the ball so much in spring anyway, it's hard to get a good read on running backs unless you're J.K. Dobbins, who just immediately stood out his freshman year.
Anything on Master Teague, Steve?
Yeah, unfortunate to see that and hear that. We don't know the
Uh-oh.
extent, and obviously, am I not coming through?
No, we
hear
got
me?
you.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunate.
We got you, Steve.
And you don't know. Okay, you don't know the full extent, obviously, of the injury, and you just hope the best and that they find a way, if there is a way, for him to come back and be able to play in 2020. That's the big thing right now. Not much you can really do or say about it. And I guess as the weeks go on, we'll talk to Kevin Wilson, the offensive coordinator, tomorrow. Maybe get a little bit tomorrow, but that's all you can do at this point.
Anything else on Master, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo what had been said, I mean, obviously a tough blow. I mean, we'll learn more as time goes on, even though Ohio State really won't confirm more than just his status of being unavailable. But you have a situation where, I mean, you don't have Crowley. I mean, it's going to be Steel Chambers. He has 19 carries for $135 and had a touchdown against Miami of Ohio. Obviously Demario McCall is a name that gets mentioned. Maybe Jalen Gill, somebody there. I'll throw in a name, and it doesn't do anything for the spring, but once you get into summer, once you get the regular enrollees coming in, I mean, maybe you look at somebody like a Cameron Martinez, who was a running quarterback in Michigan. I know Kerry Combs desperately wants him in the defensive back room, but I mean, this guy, 2-time player of the year in the state of Michigan, is an exciting, explosive type of player. Don't know if he necessarily has the physical build to be a 17, 19, 20 carry guy in Big Ten play. But, I think that there's a lot of things that are in place to where they could be able to do some committee work. We don't know if Master was going to walk right into that position right off the bat or whatnot, but he seemed to be a prohibitive favorite in a lot of regards, and figured that Chambers and Crowley were both going to push. But coming off of if it is an Achilles injury, is he going to come back? Is he going to have the same burst? Is he going to be as quick? We've seen some guys come off of an Achilles. It takes a little bit of time, even after you're fully cleared, to get back up to game speed and whatnot. So, it'll be interesting. But I would maybe consider putting a little bit more money on Justin Fields in the Heisman campaign out there right now, because it may be a little bit more of a pass-friendly offense if they're still plugging in some holes on the running side of the game.
Yeah, and Kevin. Cameron Martinez, Ryan Day was even asked if he could possibly be a running back on signing day, and he said, maybe, because the guy rushed for 5,000 or 6,000 yards in high school. So, and you look at his highlights, and it's very what you would expect to see from a dynamic running quarterback who could also be a running back. And maybe we're talking, like Kevin said, a committee. Remember, this is Ohio State, where when they have had a running quarterback, there's not many carries available, not many meaningful carries available for a third guy. So if you've got two healthy guys and a quarterback who also takes up 80 or 90 carries, you can make it just fine. You look at when they had J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber and J.T. Barrett, you didn't really need anybody else running the ball. So while they're thin, it's kind of like last year quarterback. As long as you stay healthy with that one, you'll be okay.
We've got our guy Yakov 22 asking about number 1 or 2 rated running back, depending on your service. Zach Evans out of North Shore, which is in Houston, Texas.
No.
And he's looking at all these SEC schools. He's looking at Texas A&M. Florida seems to be in the lead right now. Ole Miss has gotten a recent visit. Tennessee's in the mix. LSU. So they're all in the SEC. But This kid, he's a 2020 running back. He is yet to sign.
So what does that tell you?
Well,
pass.
He's a bit confused. I know that he's had off the field issues.
A lot of maturing left to do, and God, I wouldn't have been recruited coming out of high school. I was a mess coming out of high school, but they also weren't, offering me a football scholarship or anything along those lines. And I don't want to get into anybody's, denigrating anybody's character or anything there. But there is a reason why Ohio State never really got past the kick in the tire stage. And while we are in a situation of where Ohio State may be looking at headcount or whatnot, I would see them much more likely to look at the transfer portal than they would go to getting somebody who could be in the program theoretically for up to 5 years. You're locking down a spot. There's definitely a butterfly effect in terms of future recruiting if you sit there and you put somebody in for 5 years at this point. It's not the same thing as basketball recruiting where you're dealing with much smaller numbers. I mean, you have 85, but Ohio State, just for the people who are talking about the transfer portal, Ohio State's sitting north of 85 right now. If they were to bring in a transfer running back, I do believe they'll go to the portal, but I believe it'll be in the secondary. For everyone you bring in, that's another person that's going to have to find his way out. So, at this point, I don't see that being a feasible option.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think Evans is really in play for Ohio State. I think if somebody is added to this team, it could be a graduate transfer, a good fit in the spring after spring practice is over, kind of like Jonah Jackson last year. What happened with him, and that came about at the 11th hour. So potentially something like that could happen again this year. And you never know. It could be at the running back position if they get the long-term prognosis that Teague's not going to be able to play.
As Yakov 22 reminds us, what he said a long time ago, you need, in regards to running backs, a pair and a spare.
You also had unlimited scholarship numbers at one point, 95. I agree. They're sitting, all things being equal, they have 4 scholarship running backs between Master Teague, Chambers, Crowley, and Mayan Williams. That's not enough. That would be more than a pair and a spare. So I agree that there is something to that, and they're going to have that number. But that just doesn't mean that you can go out there and start throwing things around and, to be damned with the numbers. We'll figure it out eventually. Well, you're going to have to figure it out eventually. And, where are you going to cut at that point?
And now where people's thoughts go to anytime there's an injury in a thin position is not necessarily, we're going to have to maybe change positions and bring somebody over from defensive back or another position. But, hey, let's get to that transfer portal and see who's there. Well, as Dale Sherm is reminding us, the Indiana running back from Avon, Samson James, who's a pretty good back, was pretty highly touted coming out of high school. He's out there. So he's in the transfer portal and available.
A former Ohio State commit, Samson James, but I don't know that he does anything for you this year because I don't know that he would even be eligible because he's not a graduate. He's not moving closer to home. He's moving further away from home. So I think Ohio State already passed on him once in recruiting after having him committed. So I think there's more realistic options. I don't even a guy like a graduate transfer, Bradrick Shaw from Wisconsin, who's got a 6th year. I'm just pulling a name out as somebody maybe you go get as an experienced leadership body in that room and see what happens. Maybe they stole a running back from Wisconsin and Antonio Williams, who he was once committed to them and ends up transferring to North Carolina, maybe full circle somehow, not really. You go back to Wisconsin again and see if something works there. But, if everything goes well, you would think everybody would be healthy by October and you would be okay.
Well, there's all the talk, too, about eventually getting to the one-time transfer for everybody. But
We're not there.
Beating on that. It sounds like they want that to be 2020 to 2020, 2021, which would play a role this year, but you just never know how the NC2A is going to move, just generally slowly. Another name that's been thrown out there is Ricky Slade. He was at Penn State using the transfer portal. Ohio State was heavily involved with him. Things just kind of went separate directions at that point. Thing to remember with Samson James. Samson James, he truly did decommit from Ohio State. He wasn't shown the door so much. He decommitted when he came to an Ohio State game and watched Indiana play Ohio State here in Columbus. And then lo and behold, within a week, he was committed to Indiana. And business is business. I'm not going to say that there were probably any ill feelings or anything there, but something to remember at that point. So you never know. I think that Ryan Day did talk about the importance of monitoring the portal, and that's kind of where we're at today and whatnot. Something to keep an eye on. I don't know if it's necessarily, the most preferred course of action at this point, but you never know. Knock on wood, nothing else happens between now and the end of spring or into the summer. I don't even want to think of where we'd be at that point.
And just to clarify, I was thinking that Samson James was from Avon, Ohio. He's from Avon, Indiana. I just want to clarify that for everyone. A top 10 running back coming out of the 2019 class that picked up some yardage at IU. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is our Ohio State live stream that we bring to you each and every week. We've got Kevin Noon on the line from Rivals Buckeye Grove. Join him there. Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone.net. Steve Hellwagon from Buckeye Sports. Dale Sherm is asking us about scholarships being available, if that scholarship is given back to the program when a player is kicked off the team. Of course, the Buckeyes dismissed 2 players recently.
Yeah, they're not on scholarship anymore. They're off the team. So in my count right now, with where they stand, with CJ Saunders still being kind of in limbo, they're thinking they may hear something by April or whatnot. But without CJ Saunders counting against them, I have them at 86 of 85. And that's with those 2 spots being released once they parted ways with 2 players who are no longer in the program.
Steve's enjoying the Ohio countryside right now. Checking out, yes, very nice. Headed to a basketball game. What basketball game would that be, Steve?
Regional girls, Lakewood against Circleville are playing tonight, and it's in Zanesville, and it starts at 6:15. So we're trying to get over there and get a seat. So
very nice.
Yeah. I agree with what Kevin said about the scholarships. Yeah, you do get those 2 spots for Reap and went back. And the good news was you were over by 2, and there is no chance that they are coming back, according to Coach Day. So even if exonerated, even if the story changed or whatever, I just think the poor judgment that they showed was enough, and that's that for them.
We, of course, appreciate all the comments and questions and everybody joining us in the middle of the day on the live stream. 34 on the line, typically get anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 views by the time we post this. So we appreciate that. But I got to say, I got a smidge more respect and an appreciation for our guy, Pinero 5 Piru. I guess I pronounced that correctly. Our Michigan fan who joins us every week for our Ohio State live stream. And gives a big blue salute to me. Sorry, Go Blue. That would be Go Blue. Big Blue, Kentucky, maybe.
I can appreciate that, Mark, as somebody who writes about Michigan every week during the season. I think you need to know what's going on with the other program. Keep up to speed with the enemy. Know what's going on. It makes you a smarter fan, and it makes you able to be a more insulting fan, which I think is good in this rivalry. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of barbs for Michigan fans that they can throw right now. But you know what? Preparation. What's the opportunity and preparation is where luck, runs into you or something of that nature. And maybe with a little luck, Pinero 5 Peru can have that happen for him.
Here is the barb that I saw tossed on Twitter. Not to cut you off, Steve, real quick. Here's the barb that I saw tossed out on Twitter, and I hear this from time to time from Michigan fans. We're not obsessed with anyone that team down there in Ohio, they're obsessed with us. My response, in which I rarely troll, but I did in this, I just couldn't help myself to basically say, maybe that's your problem. Maybe you've summarized your problem. To be elite, you need to be obsessed with winning. And you're not obsessed with anything, apparently. You've pretty much summarized the issues in Ann Arbor.
Yep,
No
I
comment.
think two things. I think by being obsessed with Michigan, Ohio State's had great success against Michigan, and that's led to bigger and better things. The Big Ten championship, the national championship, the playoffs. So that's one. And there is an Ohio State-Michigan headline this week. Joe Bolden, who was a captain at Michigan, is now a graduate control coach or whatever it is on the defense, working with his old friend from Coleraine High School, Kerry Combs. So an Ohio State-Michigan headline this week.
All right. Talking Ohio State football as we do each and every week, scanning the live chat for your comments and questions. Please check out these gentlemen's work. It's great stuff. You just get a slice right here, but you got to catch Steve Hellwagon at Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman at the Ozone, and Kevin Noon on Rival platform for Ohio State football, Buckeye Grove. All right. I know that we're all excited about the upcoming matchups against UConn and Ball State that have been recently announced.
Kevin?
So Ohio State detractors can, Kevin, take their shots at the Buckeyes' scheduling approach.
Well, the fact that they announced them here in 2020 means there's an outside shot that those games will actually happen. They are, just the way modern scheduling is. You schedule those out-of-conference games and 8 years out, and they disappear. The Big Ten television contract, I think, is up 2025, 2026, so it'll be interesting to see where things coincide at that point. Ohio State has never played either of these teams. Both the teams will make in the $1.9 million range, according to various releases that I read this afternoon. And other than that, just, hope nobody gets hurt and on to the next one.
Well, in the 2025, they've added Connecticut, but also that year they are hosting Texas and Washington. So that's a fair non-conference schedule at this point. And then the next year, 2026, they've got at Texas, Boston College at home, and Ball State. So you've got two Power 5 teams in there, which we'll see if other teams move forward with that. I think by that point we'll have the 18 playoffs. So a loss in that situation won't be as harmful, and maybe we'll see more of those types of games where if you just win your conference, you're in, and you can afford some of these losses in a non-conference and give fans what they want and put fans back in the seats in the stadiums that are now, 80 to 90% filled and still missing out on the kind of capacity that those in charge would like to see, but are refusing to lower prices to get it done. So maybe by increasing the games in terms of how important they are, or the opponents, maybe that'll bring more people to the stadiums. But
all those games in 2025 are at home. The hologram of Paul Feinbaum is never going to accept that. Never going to accept that. Who have you played? Who have you played on the road? Nobody's going to care.
That's true. As we know, the SEC teams will go on the road in non-conference very often, as Alabama once did to Penn State in 2011 or 10.
Yeah, it'll be time for them to do that 15 years after that trip. The other trips always go to Atlanta or Houston or the destinations.
Neutral sites.
Spills Deals is asking us about Kate Stover, the outside linebacker who came in the 2019 class. Do we know what he's referring to there? A lot of movement with Stover. How is the linebacker numbers? Maybe running back in the fold there. Can anyone interpret that?
Yeah. Stover's move to tight end looked very good in the action that we saw. Again, practice number 1 in shorts, but he was out there, delivered a spin move that I have not seen from a tight end in quite a while. It was very impressive. When we're talking about the linebacker numbers, Ohio State certainly has kind of a glut of linebackers toward the top because, you know, they brought in that talented class behind the guys who are starting right now, the Taraja Mitchell, Dallas Gant, Kayvon Pope class or whatnot. And then I'm pulling up a scholarship chart as I'm talking here. So I'm trying to
basically 3 a year at the position.
But then you sit there. I mean, what are you going to, I mean, could you move Craig Young maybe? I mean, he played offense significantly in high school. I just don't know if I see anybody on the list right now that I would sit there and change up their development as a potential stopgap. If you're saying that everybody's going to be back by September, maybe October at the latest, are you gonna set a guy back that far in his own personal development to be a spring and summer guy? I don't like the sound of that.
We gave some time to the Ohio State backup quarterback position a few weeks ago. King Miko is asking us to size up the battle between, of course, Gunnar Hoke. We've got Jack Miller. We have C.J. Stroud. Based on what you guys have seen and what your expectations are based on scouting reports and seeing them on tape in high school, do you have any thoughts about how you see this shaping up? Tony?
Well, right now, what Ryan Day said is they're going to rotate those three pretty evenly behind Justin Fields. And when Justin Fields feels like he needs a few more reps, he can take them. But it seems like right now they're working those three with the twos. And Day even said they'd work them some with the ones. And we'll see what happens. I would be shocked if one of the freshmen moves forward because I think that's perhaps detrimental to the other freshmen, and they might want to keep those guys as closely together for as long as possible. But then again, if one of them steps forward and is so good that he has to be the backup, then that's what you do. But it is interesting to watch Gunnar Hoke throw and then watch Jack Miller and C.J. Stroud and watch them go through that stuff. From what I saw yesterday, Gunnar Hoke looked pretty good, throwing the ball downfield, hit Jamison Williams, I believe, on one deep pass where Williams was open by a good 5 or 8 yards against a couple of walk-ons, but still. And then C.J. Stroud had some nice throws downfield. I mostly saw Jack Miller just throwing shorter stuff, to the sideline stuff. But C.J. Stroud had a nice toss to Demario McCall towards the end of practice on a corner route in the end zone where Demario made a nice grab on the sideline, got his feet in, caught it on Bryson Shaw, a redshirt freshman safety, and then as Demario McCall got back up on his feet, he tapped Shaw on the head with the helmet, I guess as a little extra point, saying, "I just dunked on you." And all is great in the Ohio State passing game world with the backup quarterbacks based on what we've seen. But yeah, it's those three are going at it, and they're going to be given a chance evenly, and they'll go through all of the different receivers because you don't want to be one guy. How is one guy going to win the job as the backup if all he has is the number 3 offensive line and the walk-on receivers? So you get everybody a taste and see what happens.
Steve, any thoughts on what the Buckeyes have behind Fields this spring?
Yeah, very impressed with what I saw yesterday out of both Stroud and Miller. Very excited about the future. Stroud, to me, inside track. He showed a little bit of running ability as well yesterday. Again, no shoulder pads, just kind of playing against air yesterday. But like Tony said, you can't take away that throw in the end zone. That was exciting stuff to see. The young guy, Stroud, and the old guy, McCall, hook up for the touchdown. Pretty fun stuff.
Anything on the quarterbacks, Kevin?
I'll reserve judgment, and once we get to see him a couple more times, I agree with everything that was said. Gunnar Hoke, it was nice seeing him out there throwing the ball, whatnot. I mean, the freshmen, they're one practice in. I'm not going to get too up or too down about what I saw there at that point. No pass rush, no nothing going on there. But I think the future's bright in the position, and it was nice being able to sit there and see what looked like a full complement of quarterbacks all in their black no-contact jerseys or whatnot, especially after just the bubble that was created with transfers, with losing Martell and the Texas kid. I mean, just losing everybody there. It seems like the numbers are finally right.
for his
Kevin said, it's just day one. That's something Ryan Day said. It's just day one, and you don't want to go making big judgments on day one. But I'll do, I have no problem doing that with what we saw from Jackson Smith-Njigba, the freshman receiver yesterday, was catching everything. He was covered and catching everything. He was wide open and catching everything. Deep balls, stuff on the sideline, moving the chains. The guy is he reminds me of when I first saw him a couple years ago. He reminded me of KJ Hill, but he's more explosive. He's more Garrett Wilson in terms of, like we saw this from Garrett Wilson a little bit last spring, where he's making plays, catching things. And Jackson Smith-Njigba in the slot. Garrett Wilson now in the slot, which is another big development. We saw him just catch a little in route and go probably 70 yards untouched after that, beating everybody to the sideline. So those two guys, if that is what you're looking at in the slot this season, could put up some serious numbers. I don't know if that'll be the 163 odd catches from Paris Campbell and KJ Hill in 2018, but Garrett Wilson in the slot this year, I mean, you could see 70 catches out of that guy because they love to throw to that position. And then you get Jackson Smith-Njigba, like one practice in, I don't care. That guy's going to be really, really good.
I was going to ask this strictly about Justin Fields, but I'm going to open it up because we've got vast experience here covering Ohio State football. Who's the most impressive guy you've ever seen? Just forget the athleticism, running around as an athlete, as a quarterback like a Troy Smith, but just throwing the football. Not the decisions made, just the ball coming off the fingertips. Who's been the most impressive?
I think we're all just waiting to see who's going to go first.
I'm waiting on Steve.
Steve, we'll start with you. Most impressive Ohio State just thrower of the football, even if he didn't make good decisions. Just slinging that thing.
Well, Cardale. I mean, Cardale's got that huge arm. I mean, he was big time in that regard. Troy Smith had a pretty good arm as well. I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't think you put Braxton Miller or Terrell Pryor high on that list, or J.T. Barrett, but they were good quarterbacks nonetheless. I mean, I go back as a kid watching Art Schlichter. He was uncanny, some of the things he could do. So I don't know. Those are some of the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, I would have said, if we're just saying throwing the ball, decisions be damned, it's Cardale. I mean, just the way the ball, the flick of the wrist and whatnot. But, I remember Cardale as a high school quarterback coming up to Ohio State camps, and he would make an NFL-looking throw, and then he would throw one into the turf where it looked like he just didn't release the ball, and it almost hit him in the foot. But when it came to arm strength and just that athletic ability to be able to throw the ball, it was definitely him in terms of just under that criteria.
Well, and you guys remember for spring games for a few years, there'd be quarterback competitions, and one of them would be the long throw competition, and Cardale would win it every year, even, not even trying. And J.T. Barrett would get understandably, I don't want to say angry, but like angry at his friend, playfully angry at seeing how much further Cardale Jones could throw the football than him. But Dwayne Haskins, let's not forget about Dwayne Haskins, who could pinpoint some passes, and he had a big arm. I think last year, just watching Justin Fields in contrast to Matthew Baldwin, like the first spring, watching them both throw the ball, Fields was very different than anybody else that Ohio State had, just with his trajectory of the ball. But yeah, Cardale, it was kind of like a Carney show watching him.
Yeah,
at least at halftime, trying to throw the football 80 yards. It's like, let's watch it, and then he would come pretty close and not try.
I was going to say, if he ever took it seriously, who knows how far he could have thrown it. I mean, it was always a big joke. I mean, that's Cardale, just, one of my favorite players I've covered in terms of just a great personality, always just this $1 million smile. And, if he would have taken that seriously, I mean, he could have thrown it over those mountains like Uncle Rico.
That's right.
Well, if he could have taken a lot of things more seriously, then, that's probably the story of his Ohio State career. And I mean, he's a guy who committed when, Braxton Miller was already committed. 5-star guy. He's like, yeah, whatever. I want to be a Buckeye. And I remember when he had to come in for the Michigan game in 2014 or whenever. Yeah, 2014. And He said he wasn't really taking things seriously until basically after that game. And that's when things really started to click for him. And you wonder what could have happened if things had clicked like back in high school, like the guys now, when the high school quarterbacks, their entire life is being a quarterback. And you've got all these personal coaches and stuff like that. What if Cardale Jones could have been exposed to that at a younger age, what he could have become? Instead, he only had to retire as Ohio State's only undefeated starting quarterback ever.
10-0. So I always liked and enjoyed the way Troy Smith threw the ball.
Mhm.
Just he had like that slingshot, kind of like the way he would cock it back, and then it showed that he, at least to me, that he took the position and he took his approach to football very seriously, certainly, and played with a chip on his shoulder. And I think he made himself a really good passer, more than that being natural to him. And you could tell he really worked on his mechanics, and he turned into a pretty good thrower. And he picked up an award along the way or two. Cardale Jones. So are we discounting his emergence in the XFL?
He needs to get traded because that Pep Hamilton offense is horrible. And I know we're talking about a small league, and we're really talking about a league where the offense is significantly behind the defense, save one team. But wow, that DC Defender offense is putrid. And after the first two games where he looked really strong, the last two games have been about as bad can get. He's been yanked. Not good.
Hashtag fire Pep Hamilton.
Fair enough.
We unfortunately are saying goodbye to Steve along the way. He has asked me to dump him. So no, I did not take that upon myself to dump Steve. Of course, wouldn't do that. But I guess he didn't know that he could have done that himself. Kevin Noon on the line from Buckeye Grove, and of course Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, talking Ohio State football with the Buckeyes finally in the field this week for the first few days of spring practice. And of course the big news today, Master Teague will miss the rest of the spring, and we don't know the extent of that injury. Or maybe the big news for you is the UConn and Ball State signings for 2025 and 26. All right. How often do you guys get to talk to the players?
For spring, it's going to be a couple times a week. I mean, they practice this week. They're on spring break next week. I think we get like 2, maybe 3 on a good week chances to be on campus. But some of those weeks or some of those appearances, we only get Coach Ryan Day, and that's it. So it varies. We get them by position group is how it is. So the plan is that we will get each position group, but we double up on a lot of days. So, carry the 2 by 3, co-sign this. I have no idea.
Yeah, and tomorrow it is tight ends and linebackers, which also is Kevin Wilson, the tight ends coach, offensive coordinator, and Al Washington, linebackers coach. So, I mean, you could have 6, 7 different guys out there at one point. You're running around, and then they just keep. I mean, we may see 12 or 14 guys. Who knows tomorrow? And you can only get to so many of them. But yeah, it's. And then, like Kevin said, they go on spring break, and then they'll come back, and we'll get 2 more position groups or 1 more position group the next day, and that's kind of what it is during the season as well. Not necessarily by position group, but we'll get them twice a week or maybe once. It varies, and I forget each year exactly.
It varies, and you have to be doing something for us to get you. So we won't get the incoming freshmen probably until the season. To be quite honest, I mean, if they do a media day or not remains to be seen, and whatnot. So it's a real. At least to us, it feels like a real haphazard way that it's all put together in terms of how we get them or whatever.
I think Ohio State does an awesome job with how they organize everything, and they allow.
Sorry, Jerry. Sorry, notes.
They give us all the access we could ever want or need. Thank you, Ohio State.
Moving along, I'm sure you guys noticed that James Franklin was given a pretty healthy extension and upgrade from about $5.5 million to what's going to be about 6.3 over the length of the contract. The focus goes to Michigan and what they are accomplishing or fail to do so each and every year, but Penn State has pretty much been in the same ballpark. Obviously, they're coming from a different place in regards to what Bill O'Brien had to take them through 7 or 8 years ago. James Franklin, people may forget that mid-2016, before beating the Buckeyes at home, at one point they were 3-2 that season, had been blown out by Michigan, lost to Pitt, and he was coming off 2 7-6 seasons, and at 3-2, things weren't looking so great for him. They go to the Rose Bowl, win the Big Ten championship, and now they've won 11 games 3 of the past 4 years, and some major bowl games as well. So your thoughts, Kevin, about the job James Franklin's doing at Penn State?
Well, I mean, one difference between him and Jim Harbaugh is James Franklin's found Indianapolis before. And, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's true as well. I mean, they've at least been able to get to the Big Ten championship game, not having to sit there and have a participant trophy in terms of, well, we won, we were a co-champion of our division, setup, whatever. James Franklin's name had been mentioned for other jobs, USC, whatnot. So generally when that happens, you're going to get a raise. I don't know if they're going to ever be able to really get up the hump there or get over the hump. I tend to think no, but based on what's out there at this point, I understand why they gave him the raise, but we shall see. We shall see what comes out of that. And when we get into the back 3 years of Ryan Day's new contract, where the numbers are to be determined, I guarantee you Ryan Day's numbers will be higher than James Franklin's numbers.
Is getting over the hump, beating Ohio State and winning the division more often than not? Is that getting over the hump?
I mean, I think that, he had his whole diatribe about being an elite team, and they haven't been able to accomplish a lot of those missions. It's going to be interesting in 2020 as Ohio State goes in with 6 games under its belt, having to go to Penn State, and I guarantee you it's going to be a whiteout, and it's going to be all of that going on and so forth. But, they haven't been able to string together enough of those 11-1 types of seasons there. They win the games they're supposed to win, and then in the games that they're not supposed to win, I mean, they win a couple of them, but they're certainly not winning enough to necessarily to where I would sit there and say a coach is worth $6.5 million. But more power to James Franklin if he can cash those checks. If they want to send one my way, I'll give you my PayPal address.
And we would hear James Franklin's name every year in terms of other schools or the NFL, or you just hear his name mentioned. And I think that this is one way to keep that from happening. Being a Big Ten school, you can pay to keep your coach. Like every single school could pay to keep their coach because of the network money that they make. And I think this is a preemptive strike against anybody trying to come and take James Franklin, because things are getting better. You mentioned, Mark, the rough starts early on, and now you kind of expect they are the number 2 program in the Big Ten East. Although when you ask what is getting over that hump, it's can you do what Mark D'Antonio did at Michigan State? When you compare yourself to Ohio State, can you beat Ohio State? He did that. Now you have to do more than that, or when that stops happening, you still have to do your 10 or 11 wins. D'Antonio kind of forgot about that, and the program kind of went south from there. But Penn State has different standards than Michigan State, so they view themselves as an Ohio State. But I think you've got to have conference titles, you've got to have playoff appearances. Or you're, I don't think anybody's going to consistently get over the Ohio State hump. What is enough? Once or twice every 5 years, I think that's pretty fair. And I don't think you could complain about 2 years out of 5 years beating Ohio State, getting to winning Big Ten title, getting to the playoffs. I think anybody in the Big Ten East would take that, especially Michigan.
Clemson fans having fun in the live chat right now. Post route was open, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
We talk Ohio State football every week. We don't have a specific time, so this is what you need to do. Subscribe to the channel. I send out the notification as soon as we're able to figure out a time and a date each and every week. And then you turn on the bell and you get the notification on when we will come live that particular week. We appreciate the contributions from, of course, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, who's enjoying some girls basketball right now. Probably just about tip-off time here, coming very soon. Got Tony Gerdeman right in the middle there from the ozone.net, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. Unless you guys have anything else, I think we're good to go.
Yep, sounds good.
Thanks for stopping by. We'll figure out a time and see you guys next week.
Back to North Mexico for me.
And for everybody on the line, which is 57, that's our high water mark. You know what you need to do. Just go back and rewatch the video and get what you missed. And we will see you next week.